The other game we were watching and talking about was Florida versus Mississippi State. This kicked off the SEC slate at noon on, I want to say, ESPN, and both teams were looking to rebound from some tough losses to get a win. And one team, I would say, definitely had a pretty fun day, and I'm sure Billy Napier was able to breathe a sigh of relief and a well-deserved breath, because the one thing that stood out to me in this game was the Florida offense. Looked really resurgent. Graham Mertz, 19 for 21, 3 touchdowns. He looks cozy out there.
Yeah, he did. The 2 incompletions on the game for the 2 quarterbacks. They seemed for this game to have established an offensive rhythm and play calling that suits getting these guys into rhythm. They only had 7 passes thrown longer than 10 yards on the game. And Graham Mertz went 6 for 7 on those passes. They didn't force anything deep. They didn't force the mid-range. Let's keep the ball near us, get a lot of different players involved, and build some momentum for Mertz. And I think that's what he needed. We saw him before he came to Florida be a little bit of a turnover machine. And then getting to Florida last year, he developed this year, starting off not on the right foot. All right, let's dial it back, play a little bit more conservative. And it worked. They looked well on the offensive side of the ball. Running left a little bit to be desired with Montreal Johnson Jr. 15 yards for 15 carries for 68 yards. But overall, the offense looks a little bit revamped.
Yeah, overall, the offense definitely looks pretty solid. And then on the defensive side, they still get up a ton of yards, but less about that. I would really focus more for Mississippi State. Obviously, Florida's offense looked dominant. That meant that Mississippi State's defense did not look as dominant, and it's once again showing us what appears to be truth and not just an anomaly. This defense is one of the worst defenses in the country. They need to really try to, get better pursuit angles. I guess when I think about some of the positives for this game for Mississippi State, you look at it was a close game for the most part throughout, at least the first quarter, 7-7. And then I just feel like Florida's offense exploded in the second quarter, 21 points. Lagway was able to get in as well. And, he was able to help contribute towards the score. But for Mississippi State, it definitely left more to be desired on the defensive side. So yeah. I'll let you kind of go.
Yeah, I mean, fifth to last in points in power forward ball, points given up. So they're giving up a ton of points. The defense just hasn't been, solid. Giving up, only having 2 incompletions on the day for Florida. The DBs were unable to really break anything up. We saw a little bit of running after catch, like you mentioned, with some of the pursuit angles for Mississippi State. And they couldn't get anything going offensively early on that, it just felt like the defense had to stay on the field a little bit longer than they needed to. You didn't build the momentum, especially coming into this game where they're sitting at the bottom of the SEC, Florida kind of right there with them, like as 2 teams that have all these question marks. The momentum wasn't there, and it just felt like the defense was flat for the game when I was watching it. And then offensively, Blake Shapen out for the rest of the year. Unfortunately, we're big Blake Shapen guys on the podcast. We're fans of him. We hate to see a season-ending injury. So they have Michael Van Buren Jr. as their guy, true freshman, and they have a slate ahead for him. But he came into the game and wasn't necessarily able to do that much either.
Yeah, I mean, and then when you lose a guy like Blake, like he's looked solid this year, and I think just playing a ton of college football helps. Playing in a Big 12 conference championship, having Power 4 experience at Baylor, that's a tough loss. And you look at this game, one thing that he showed us was what he can do on the ground, and what Mississippi State was able to do on the ground was something to, I would say, be a pillar to build on. 3 rushing touchdowns. I think over 100 something yards collectively as a team rushing between their starting running back and some other players. So that was impressive. And then again, on the Florida side, we still saw them giving up a ton of yards on defense. I mean, I think they gave up about 480 yards. They were averaging giving up about 7.1 yards per pass and 4.3 yards per run. So the game looked more impressive because the offense kind of took over for what the defense still was not fully able to stop. It was just more so that Mississippi State didn't have enough to match what the offense was doing from Florida.
Yeah, the running game was huge. They had all 3 running backs pretty involved there. Yep. I mean, for Florida's defense, kind of a knock on them. Mississippi State was almost able to double their rushing yards from the first 3 games just in this one game. Yep. So that's not a good sign for Florida when you're playing UCF, who is number one in the country in yards per game, as your next opponent. But Mississippi State was kind of at the bottom of that going into this game, and you gave up a ton of yards to them. So for Florida, they really need to be able to do more on the run stuffing side. The linebackers for Florida played well in coverage. They really locked up the middle of the field. That was where Blake Shapen was looking to before he got injured, a lot of the middle, and the linebackers were able to swallow a lot of that up. But they were never really down there to run stuff, stop Mississippi State from getting yards there. The defense for Florida just still feels a little bit discombobulated.
Yeah.
I'd say the DBs tackled pretty well in space. Anything that Mississippi State got together, through the air, they swallowed up pretty quick from the defensive side. So that's, a positive for Florida's defense there.
Definitely. And another positive when you look at both teams, I think they're both going into a bye. So after the bye, Florida can use this week to watch the Colorado UCF game, because we'll be playing UCF the week after. And Mississippi State will be playing Texas this week. So they're not on a bye.
They're going against a big offense. Yeah.
They're going against a really, really big offense. And so we'll see what they do on the defensive side. It's just not looked great. We obviously hope to see something different. It's in conference play, and Texas is, all things considered, the best team in the country right now, at least from 1 and 2 polls and in a lot of statistical categories. So we'll see what they get there. But overall, we could say Florida is back for a week. We could say Florida is back for a season. It's finally nice to say we saw something good on one side of the ball for the entirety of the game, as they scored in every quarter of this game.
Yeah, and still missing their wide receiver one there, and able to do it through the air, with only 2 incompletions, missing their number one guy. If I'm looking at Florida goals for the future, where does Florida go from here? I think you just got to start Mertz and have him be your guy. Like Lagner played well when he came in, but it seemed that they were doing more of that to change the momentum. But you've seen in this game that Mertz has that in him to do it. You just have to give him the reins to do it with this new scheme. He threw the ball, shorter than 10 yards more times in this game than he did against A&M Miami combined. So they were early on in the season having him throw deep. He was 0 for 4 in that first game against Miami, throwing deep. This one, just dial it back. They built a scheme around him. I think you go with Mertz going forward. Defense just needs to play a little bit more solid, because you can't have, he's scoring 45 points, scored 45 in this game. You can't expect that from him every week to keep up with a defense that's struggling to stop people on the ground. For Mississippi State going forward, I don't know where the road is here for them. You do have a young quarterback. There is always potential for him to develop and be able to shift around. Offensive line just needs to keep him clean. 7 pressures on 17 dropbacks isn't good for a true freshman coming into a game.
True. And at least you can see what he has in the tank as you continue to recruit quarterbacks, whether that's from the high school ranks, the JUCO ranks in the portal, or from other Power 4 group of 5 schools that can make that jump. Maybe you get a Pavia type guy if that's what's needed or what's out there. But at least you get to see what you have under the helm in the quarterback room here. And of course, we never want to see injuries at the quarterback position. Defensively, we know what needs to improve. We'll see if it's possible or if it comes to fruition. But again, I feel like I focus more on the segment about Florida getting a good win. They're back. Maybe you look at these next 3 games for them. They have UCF, Tennessee, and UK. If you can come out of that, two out of 3 would be, I think, an A+. Yeah. I think 1 of 3 with 2 of those games being close is a B. Being UK being close or UCF being close, Kobe Hudson's going to be quite the test on that defensive back unit, like with UCF, and they'll get a familiar face from the SEC with KJ Jefferson at quarterback for UCF as well.
Yeah.